The verdict and violence in Ferguson. Can Bill Cosby clear his name in the wake of sexual assault allegations? Plus, Amtrak gets on the right financial track. All these stories and more coming up on The Rundown.
All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Ready, camera,
Talent.
Ready, camera.
Record.
3, 2, 1.
Record.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is The Rundown, where Scott Ott impersonates Michelle Fields. I'm your host, John Phillips. Joining us from Dallas, Texas, is the aforementioned Scott Ott, sitting in for Michelle Fields, and looks just like her, I must add. Look at that.
It's a sad day for America, John. Sad day for America.
And here in studio, we're joined by stand-up comic Stephen Cruz. Now it's time to get to the top of the rundown. And because it's the holidays and we're in the moment of thanks and sharing, I'll just go ahead and go first anyway. Officer Darren Wilson will not face any charges in the shooting of 18-year-old Michael Brown. Brown, of course, was shot back on August 9th after a confrontation with the officer. Officer Wilson was headed to a call of a baby not breathing when a dispatcher announced a strong-arm robbery at a convenience store. The officer then saw Michael Brown, who matched the description of the robbery suspect. In this surveillance video, you could see Michael Brown pushing a store clerk before stealing a box of tobacco. These pictures were released by the district attorney's office. You can see Officer Wilson suffered bruising to his cheeks after the confrontation with Brown. According to Officer Wilson, Brown reached inside the police cruiser and grabbed the cop's gun. Wilson, fearing for his life, said he shot Brown. A grand jury did not want to indict the 28-year-old officer, saying he was protecting himself. After the grand jury's decision was announced, violence erupted on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri. 2 police cars and nearly a dozen buildings were set on fire by the unruly crowd. A number of stores were vandalized and looted as police fired tear gas, trying to contain the mob. 14 people were injured. It wasn't just in Ferguson, Missouri. We've had freeways shut down here in Southern California. Same thing with bridges in New York City. And I've got to say this. If they think they're helping their cause, if these protesters think that they're helping advance the cause of civil rights, they're sadly mistaken. Because what Dick Nixon referred to as a silent majority, people of all races, they're sitting back in their house and they're watching these images on TV. They're listening to these stories on the radio, and they're shocked. They're appalled. They can't believe what's going on the streets of Ferguson and other big cities across the country. And they're really going to see a backlash that they're not expecting.
Where protests go awry, and this started a bit in the 60s, although I think the 60s radicals were a bit more committed than the modern-day protester, is when they don't protest the thing that they're supposedly mad about. If you're mad at a certain entity, find that entity's building or somewhere, go protest in front of that. You don't say, I'm mad at the cops, and then torch a Little Caesar's pizza. Okay, that doesn't, that's nonsensical. It makes, oh yeah, we get it, you're angry. You be angry, but don't be, don't be, vandalous? Is vandalous a word? It is now. So I think that it's just more this protest for the protest's sake, largely because I firmly believe these are being ginned up by outside forces. The media started this. The spontaneous protests that erupted around the United States last night all had pre-printed signs, and everybody just seemed to materialize out of nowhere. I don't believe they were organic at all, and I think they're people just protesting because they want to be a part of something, and not because they are. 9 out of 10 of them probably don't even know what they're there for.
You know, Scott, one of the things that the left accuses us on the right of doing is not having our facts straight. When we're talking about global warming, for example, they say they're the keeper of the facts, and we are the ones that are going by made-up fairy tales. And of course, people with PhDs are still arguing about what they consider to be the established facts, but that's their point. When you listen to the debate that's going on right now on MSNBC, on CNN, I was driving around yesterday morning and I was listening to talk radio, and I heard some of these protesters say that Michael Brown was handcuffed on the ground and shot in the back by this cop. And things like that are just accepted as facts by these thugs who are out on the streets burning things down and wreaking havoc. They really have no idea what they're talking about in relation to the facts of this case. And in my opinion, Scott, I don't know about yours, they're really being exploited and ginned up by the likes of Al Sharpton and other hosts on MSNBC, and for that matter, CNN, into creating what is becoming a really violent television show.
Well, yeah, and let's start by saying that the vast majority of black residents of Ferguson, Missouri have nothing to do with this. This group, this mob is, as Stephen pointed out, outside agitators combined with homegrown thugs. The outside agitators tend to be elitist liberals who rely on the homegrown thugs to create chaos because, frankly, the outside agitators themselves don't like turning over cars and setting things on fire. That's the dirty work. So they get the homegrown thugs who just want to rob places and cause mayhem to do that part for them. The people that are caught in the crossfire here are not even the police so much as the residents of Ferguson, Missouri, who, as you know, I heard one lady talking on the radio who said, I've lived here for 16 years. Where am I going to shop now? Where am I going to buy stuff now? How can I continue to live here? I don't know what I'm going to do. And where there should be a coming together, I think, is between the normal residents of Ferguson and every town in America and the police force that's trying to protect them. And they need to gang up on these liberal activists and these local homegrown thugs.
You know, I live in Los Angeles. I've lived in Southern California my entire life. My family has lived here since the 1800s. I was talking to my grandma yesterday about this riot. She's lived through two riots in this city, the Watts riots in the 60s and then the riots after the Rodney King verdict that happened in the 1990s. And I asked her, I said, well, you've been through this a couple of times. What's going to happen now? What happens next week? What happens January 1st? What happens as we move away from the looting, we move away from the rioting, and people let it sink in? And she said, well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. A lot of the people that follow the rules, a lot of the people that weren't out there burning things down, they're going to leave Ferguson. They're going to move to the suburbs. And you know what? A lot of them are going to buy guns because they're going to remember when things got so hot, the cops moved out because it was too dangerous for them to be there. And it was this martial law sort of mentality that was going on in the city that they called home. And if the left, if there's anything that the left doesn't want, it's more people owning guns and more people living in rural America or suburban America, and that's what's going to happen here.
Oh, yeah, I mean, again, we're beating our heads against the wall because this obviously accomplishes nothing. There's the spontaneous outbursts of anger in Ferguson was one thing. The stuff that's going on now across the country is really adding to the problem, not helping anything at all. And you've even got the people now who are afraid to go out at night into the more dangerous parts of town and protest, showing up in La Jolla this morning or on the 101 here. It's absolutely tragic. I still know people from the Rodney King riots here who lost their businesses, and they weren't even directly rioted against or looted or anything, but because of the riot, because of people leaving, because of the things you just said, their business, they went out of business and ended up leaving LA.
Yeah, do you see a lot of people buying guns after this, Scott?
Yeah, and frankly, if anything good can come of this, it's that a lot of people will buy guns for self-protection. I think that this is the rainbow. This is the silver lining on the cloud, is that people will come to realize, you know, that when the police are only minutes away when trouble strikes, and it takes seconds for you to lose everything. So I think that's actually a salutary thing. I also think it's good that some people get out of these communities, although, you know, oh, how I wish that the finest people who live in places like this were able to stay and be part of that turnaround. But it is that fraction of a percent of monsters that is destroying these neighborhoods in urban America. And the police need to focus, as Rudy Giuliani did in New York, focus all their efforts on cornering those monsters and putting them behind bars.
All right, we'll of course have more on this developing story as new information becomes available. Now it's Scott's turn.
Well, Bill Cosby, a model father for a generation of Americans and a loquacious comedic storyteller, has fallen silent, at least on one topic, as others are now telling stories about him. Bad, serious stories. Each day, it seems, brings new accusations from women who say that he actually drugged and raped them, often decades ago. Cosby and his attorneys have refused to answer questions so far about what they call innuendo and old allegations with no evidence to back them up. Now, the Washington Post tracked down many of the women and let them describe what they claim to remember. But as of now, we have only the accuser's version of the story, since Cosby won't talk about it. So, how should the media handle this? I mean, Stephen Cruiser, if you talk about it, you risk slandering a man who built his reputation on family-friendly entertainment, still has an active career at 77, and gives millions of dollars to charity. But if you don't tell the stories, you reinforce a culture where the elite and powerful can abuse the vulnerable, and thus you become one more enabler. What's the right thing to do here, Stephen?
This is a tough one because, as you said, Cosby won't respond right now, and we keep getting new allegations every day, it seems. There's a little critical mass building up now at this point. In the beginning, I didn't want to believe it. You know, the comics are kind of gossipy, but this is one I hadn't heard over the years, honestly. And I think it's curious as to why all of them waited till now. I think it's curious as to why the Washington Post suddenly got interested in it now. And I think Cosby does need to say something soon, because if it's not true, he's going to let this go to the point where nobody's going to believe him anyway. If it is true, something needs to be done about it soon. But either way, this is just one of those tragedies that I'm trying to figure out. The media right now is painting it as, oh, look, the rich people in the country can abuse their positions no matter what color right now. That's the new narrative as of yesterday afternoon, I believe. And it's just, I am still desperately curious to find out why it's taken so long for everyone to come forth.
Well, John, if it turns out that even half of these stories are true, Bill Cosby will go from, you know, the pantheon of beloved Americans to being one of the more despicable characters in popular culture. Now, you kind of hang around in Hollywood. How is it possible that such crimes could go on for years without someone ratting him out? I mean, who else would be culpable if he's guilty?
Well, I'll first say that I believe these allegations. I think Bill Cosby is a sexual predator. These allegations are not a secret to many in this city. The National Enquirer, my pal Mike Walker, he's a gossip editor over there, had this story in their paper years ago. Other stories about other women, including the love child, were printed also in the tabloids. I don't remember if that one was the Enquirer, the Globe, or Star, or one of the other tabloids. But it was out there. People didn't want to believe it. People love this man. This man has made his name on family-friendly entertainment. This guy is a guy who's been lecturing comics, particularly black comics, over their use of language and imagery that he finds offensive. So he's a guy that, I mean, this is Bambi. This isn't Hitler. That's how people view him. But I'll tell you what's the important takeaway for me, especially for someone who follows politics like all of us do here. There's a new paradigm that exists in the world because of social media. There was nothing that Hannibal Buress said when he called Bill Cosby a rapist that wasn't already out in print. But because of Twitter and because of Facebook, this thing took off like wildfire. And just repeating old allegations were presented in front of an entirely new audience. There are a lot of people that don't read the tabloids. There are a lot of people that are born after the Cosby Show had finished its run on NBC. And this was breaking news to them. This was something that was new. So even though they were old allegations and they were old stories, they found their way in front of new eyeballs. And because of that, these new people, they saw this and they were appalled. And it's not something that's limited to Bill Cosby. And I'll tell you one person who should be thinking long and hard about what just happened to Bill Cosby. And that's Hillary Clinton. Because a lot of the allegations about Bill Clinton, the Juanita Broderick and Kathleen Willey and other stories that are associated with him that would appall a new generation of people, and those were relegated to the conservative publications and to the tabloids back in their day. But if she runs for president again, and I think that she probably will, and these stories find their way on Twitter and find their way on Facebook, this could be a huge problem for her, Scott.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's one of those things where, you know, in reality, you can't not talk about it. On the other hand, I think you got to be really, really careful about what you say. I mean, you know, a man may have millions of dollars, but really all he has is his name. And if you trash a guy who turns out to be just a victim of some gold diggers or something like that, you've really done a disservice to them. You've ruined a person. And frankly, I even think about things like, you know, do we have to put some of these folks on suicide watch because of what's happened, how their names have been sullied? I'm hoping, you know, Why do I hope that? I hope that all these women are lying. Do I think they're all lying? No.
Bill, let me say one more thing about Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby is no victim, and he's a very vindictive person. I know of at least 2 people in radio, including our good friend Tammy Bruce, who Bill Cosby got fired for saying things that Bill Cosby didn't like. Bill Cosby would make a call to the general manager, and things would happen. I mean, that was a well-publicized incident. The other personality that he got fired for talking about these rape allegations when they were in the tabloids was Wendy Williams. Wendy Williams was not always a TV host. She was a radio personality for years and years and years. And she was talking about, I mean, she didn't even really, I don't think she even came down one way or the other on what she thought. She was just mentioning them. He got her job taken away from her.
And can I add that, you know, if you look at the AP interview, and the AP has now released the extra video they shot when they did a video interview with Bill Cosby and with his wife. And at the end of the interview, when he thought he was no longer on camera, he basically turns to the reporter and says, look, we did the interview with you because we thought you were a reliable, credible organization. But if you use this video, you've clearly told me that you're not a credible organization. And you see him sitting there orchestrating that and talking to a guy off camera saying, you can make a phone call to this guy's editor and make sure that this video doesn't get used?
One point about you're mentioning Hillary Clinton and the new eyeballs right now. I think the Clinton media machine is highly functioning and well aware of that, and that's why Monica Lewinsky has already been out there blaming everyone but Bill Clinton for her life being ruined, blaming the internet. That's who she blamed. She blamed the internet for her life being ruined, not Bill Clinton. Yeah. I think that was advanced work spurred on in the background by the Clinton media machine to cover them for this very thing.
Can they get Kathleen Willey to do that?
I'm pretty sure we can make stars of them again soon if we want to.
All right, Cruiser, what do you have for us?
At the top of my rundown, Senator Ted Cruz meets with prominent Jewish political donors in New York. This week, the Texas senator met with Alan Dershowitz, Home Depot founder Bernie Marcus, and the billionaire owner of the Venetian Casino, Sheldon Adelson. Adelson was the single largest donor to Republican causes in 2012. It's believed that Cruz is considering a run for the Republican presidential nomination in 2016. Mort Zuckerman, the developer and owner of the New York Daily News, also hosted Cruz for a lunch this week. He usually backs moderate Democrats. Also of interest, investing legend and philanthropist Michael Steinhardt met with Senator Cruz at his firm's investment office. Steinhardt chaired the same Democratic Leadership Council that helped send Bill Clinton to the White House. Now, you see the two making the biggest, earliest moves for the Republicans right now, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz. You're looking at what they're doing in the background right now. And Rand Paul is taking more of a, okay, there are some demographics he wants to appeal to at the polls. Ted Cruz right now is trying to marshal some funds, which is both are bright ways to go. Ted Cruz is often portrayed by the moderates in our party and the other side as just being a hothead who's out of control. I know you are a little to the left of me on this, on how much you like Cruz, but do you view him as credible for 2016? Do you think he's making right, sound moves right now, or do you still think he's a hothead?
Here's what I think he's doing, and I think this is a smart move. The process that the Republicans engaged in last time around to pick the nominee really left Mitt Romney wounded. It caused him to spend a lot of money that he didn't want to spend in the primary. We had all of those debates where Democrats were just given all the fodder that they could possibly want to attack him, and it really damaged his chances of winning in November. The Republicans this time around, and I've been talking to some of the big Republican donors about this, they want to wrap up this process much, much, much faster than they did the last time. Mm-hmm. And all the big donors, or at least many of the big donors, want to get behind one candidate very early on and shut everyone out of the money race, everyone else out of the money race. And whoever gets to those donors first is the one that's going to be the favorite. And Ted Cruz recognizes this, and he's clearly trying to wrap them all up as fast as he can.
Scott, I was going to ask you something different, but given what John just said, there's a lot of old school Republican establishment money that's kind of sitting on the sidelines right now, waiting to see if maybe Romney will do something again, if maybe Jeb Bush will throw his hat in the ring right now. Do you think any of that can be persuaded early on to move in Cruz's direction or even Paul's direction?
I think it can, and I'm no fan of anybody at this point, so I'm not saying this from a perspective of a cheerleader for somebody, but I think it can. And one of the things that I've learned in my own local political experience running for office in Pennsylvania was that a lot of these establishment guys, it's not about ideology for them, and I don't want to be callous and say, oh, all they care about is winning, but what they really care about is the Republican Party. They feel like they were there, decades ago when things were tough, and they struggled, and they paid a lot of money to try to keep the Republican Party together. What upsets them isn't so much, Ted Cruz's views on immigration or abortion or gun control or anything like that. What would upset them is if Cruz looked like somebody who wanted to go rogue on the party and then somehow aggrandize himself by tearing down the party. And frankly, some in Congress have that opinion of him. Where I think he can do well is if he can do what Rand Paul has been doing somewhat successfully, and that is allying himself with some of the stalwarts of the Republican establishment in order to be able to move forward. Now, the trick there is not to sacrifice your soul to the devil in the process.
Cruz was asked, that was alluded to, because of the opinion of him right now, could he win? And he said, look, the media's got two caricatures for Republicans. We're either evil or stupid. He said, I'm honored that they've created a new category for me. I'm crazy. So I think he will do some good. I think he can get out in front of the narrative if he so chooses.
All right, now it's time to get you your sweet spot.
Sweet spot.
This is where we take a look at some of the lighter stories making headlines. And Cruiser, you're up first.
In the sweet spot, BlackBerry. Yes, BlackBerry is offering up to $550 to iPhone users to switch. Starting December 1st, iPhone users can switch their phone to the BlackBerry Passport phone and get up to $550 back from BlackBerry. The deal is only for the iPhone 4, 5, and 6 models and expires in February. They're making no overtures to us Android owners because they know we won't switch.
You know what? I had a BlackBerry. I love my BlackBerry.
I missed mine.
And everyone made fun of me every time I pulled it out.
If they had ever gotten a real web browser, I'd probably still have a BlackBerry.
This new one is sleek as a Rubik's Cube, my friends.
There you go. It gets a Scott Ott seal of approval. Scott, you're up next.
Well, recently, Amtrak, the nation's government-run passenger rail service, decided to start operating like a business. Ridership is actually up modestly, and ticket prices are up, as you may know if you live there, in the Northeast Corridor, the Boston, New York, Philadelphia to Washington route, what I like to call the Crony Express. As a result, Amtrak is actually having its best year in the past 40 years. In fiscal 2014, it posted a $227 million loss. But it was the smallest loss in 40 years. And that's if you don't count depreciation and some other things, which could push total losses over $1 billion this year. And by the way, although Amtrak is publicly funded, it's managed as a for-profit corporation, just without the profit part. These less disastrous than usual results mean just one thing to me. The rail service should be on track to be sold to the highest bidder. I mean, after 43 years, I think it's prime time to end the world's slowest train wreck.
You know, in the Northeast, it makes a lot of sense to take Amtrak, but out here, our Amtrak is Southwest Airlines.
Well, as you know, so since my dad's been in the hospital, I've been taking the train back and forth from here to Tucson a lot because it's so cheap. It's cheaper than gas. It's cheaper than planes. And it's not bad for like an overnight run. Obviously, I wouldn't be taking it across country or anything, right? But I'm telling you, it's this close to being decent. What Scott's saying, if it were sold and became privatized, it's like this. It's not like somebody has to do a lot of work. They have to refurbish some cars and do a few other things. And that it's this close. If I had to depend on it, I would be more anxious for them to get sold right away.
I'll be honest, you take the train for the drink card.
Well, I don't have to, no, there's no drink cart. You don't have to wait for the drinks, you just go get one. That's what I love about Amtrak. You just go, hey, well, I'm in the observation deck. Yeah, I'm observing.
In my sweet spot, a Chicago man calls 911 while he was pulled over by a police officer to report a fake shooting in hopes that he wouldn't receive a ticket. The man, identified as 23-year-old Jorge Navarro Jr., was pulled over for traffic violations Well, he was waiting to receive his ticket. He called 911 and said that he heard 8 gunshots and a man was lying on the ground. Now he faces a number of charges, including making a bogus 911 call, which is a felony, a much bigger problem than just getting a speeding ticket.
Don't think outside the box if you're just going to think your way into a smaller box.
Yeah, that's one of those things. I think it's very clever, but I don't think he worked that all the way through before making the phone call.
Criminals, shockingly, are not known for being the smartest in society.
Well, the ones that are become politicians.
Or
All
TV
right,
hosts.
that's going to do it for today's show. We want to know what your thoughts are on the grand jury verdict for Officer Darren Wilson. Be sure to leave your comments in the comment section below. I'm John Phillips for Stephen Cruz, joining me here in Los Angeles, and Scott Ott in the great state of Texas. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.